Hello and welcome everybody. Today's webinar is titled Minimizing Costs and Improving Quality in Data Warehousing Projects. This webinar is being brought to you by Idexcel and DataGap. The speakers for today's webinar are Venkata Dasari, who is our Director of Testing Services with Idexcel, and Adi Bhagarappu, Director of DataGap. In this webinar, you will learn about the importance of data for any enterprise and the efficient ways to improve quality in data warehouse projects. A few tips about the platform we are using to deliver this webinar. Once the presenter starts the webinar, all the phone lines will be put on mute so that we have a clear audio from the presenter. You can ask questions anytime you want on the moderated chat window at the right corner of the screen. When we run the poll, you can answer on your monitors and the data will be collated and presented live after the polling time ends. If you miss any part of the webinar, you can visit our website, idexcel.com, and listen to this webinar on demand. Before we start the webinar, we would like to introduce Idexcel and DataGap. Idexcel is an IT services company providing cutting-edge technology solutions and testing services to Fortune 500 companies since 1998. We are 600 associates strong and have 10 global delivery locations. We are proud to say that most of our workforce is domain certified, and thus we bring in domain knowledge, technical capabilities, and thought leadership to our client engagement. We are partners with industry-leading technology giants like Oracle, IBM, Microsoft, and HP. We are also partners with leading solution providers such as DataGap. About DataGap. DataGap is an innovative company with patented technology in the area of data integration testing. And their products help organizations with testing automation of the data warehouses, data migration, upgrades, and other integration patterns. With that, I welcome Venkat to take over and deliver the webinar. Thank you all.
Thanks, Anna, for the introduction. A warm welcome to everybody who is attending the webinar today. The primary agenda for today's discussion is to talk about why data is very important for any kind of organization and why data quality is of utmost importance. Then we'll talk about some typical data testing issues that many organizations face and what are the different best practices that anybody can employ for doing data testing, and a comprehensive solution for data warehousing testing. That's what the primary crux of this webinar is going to be. And finally, we'll open up the floor for Q&A, and we'll take up the questions as they come in. As Anna was mentioning, towards the right bottom corner of your window, you'll see a place for entering questions. So if you have any questions, specific questions, please put your questions in there. And Anna will be collating the questions as they come in, and we'll take up the questions toward the end of the webinar. So first of all, let's talk about why data is very important to any kind of enterprise. So many critical business decisions are primarily based on the data. So the volume of the data that enterprises collect over a period of time, they use for trending and analyzing what the trends are and then making the business decisions. So that's why data is very important for any kind of organization. And always we hear about phrases like, we are trying to migrate this application, or, retire this application, or, replace with something else. But you never hear such kind of statements for data, because data is the core of any kind of business. And, you always accumulate more and more data and optimize your data, but, you don't really throw away your data. So that's why, it's one of the very quintessential elements of any organization. And, for example, if you think about organizations like Google, what makes Google so powerful? It's not the amount of applications that it has, but the amount of data it has. It has information about each of us, as in when we try to browse something on Chrome browser or do something with their applications, they keep on collecting information about our preferences, personal details. And that's what makes Google so powerful in this world. It has millions of data records about people who are accessing Google applications. So that's why data is very important for any kind of enterprise. So if you look at the data quality itself, having a huge number of records of data is one thing, and having a quality set of records or data is one more other thing. So some of the Gartner research that was done pretty recently, it says that because of the poor quality of the data, on average, every organization is losing almost $8.2 million annually. And 22% of the people who have reported losses, they are beyond 20 million a year. And 4%, the figure stands beyond 100 million, which is quite a big number if you look at, from the loss that organizations are incurring from bad data. So to summarize, if you look at all of the organizations in the U.S., almost $700 billion is lost every year because of the data quality issues. Now, going forward, Adi will talk about the different issues that typical organizations face during data testing, and what are the best practices that can be employed, and what are the best ways and optimized approach that can be followed for doing data testing. And he'll also be showing a demo of a tool that we have that can be pretty handy in terms of doing a thorough data warehousing testing. So let me hand off it to Adi. Adi, can you please take it forward from here?
Great. Thanks, Venkat. Hello, everyone. So as Venkat said, 700 billion is a pretty staggering amount. And typically when we work in various industries, let's say a regulated industry like life sciences, healthcare, financial, data becomes even more critical because there's always a fine associated with the non-compliance. There could be issues with PDMA regulations, Part 11, 21 CFR from FDA, or various other things. And then we also see a lot of lost revenue as well. Simple example, if the data in the customer relationship management system is very different from a customer master, then how confident are you that you're able to pinpoint the customer before we serve them, right? So it's important to ensure that we have the right data across various systems to prevent any leakage of revenue. And then reporting is often used for decision making across enterprises. And like Venkat said, how can we make sure that the reports could be looking great, but can we trust the data that is underlying these reports is a major question. And on the maintenance front, it's another important aspect because as most of us in the software development know, it's pretty much, if at all we are able to identify defects before shipping or before getting into production, the cost is much lower. But often what happens is we ship the software, whether it is a warehouse, reporting, whatever it is, we ship the software and then we identify so many issues over the life cycle of that particular system, and then it's very difficult to identify. It's very expensive to fix the problems. And these kinds of data issues get amplified when we deal with many data integration patterns like the ones shown below. Let's say an enterprise could be doing data consolidation or moving data from one system to another. As an example, one of the clients is moving data from Oracle to Netezza in their warehouse. So how confident are we that the data moved as expected? And the third thing, master data management, or finally getting into the warehouse, right? We have so many systems, so many source systems, and how can we ensure that the data actually moved as expected is a major issue. Next, please. If we consider the data warehouse problem alone, the path for the final reporting is pretty treacherous. If you start from the left side, what we see is we have CRM systems, we have flat files, we have web services, so many sources. And then even before we process it further downstream, we need to be confident that the data in these source systems is as expected. That is phase one. Often what happens is, if a data is coming in through flat files, there could be issues in the flat files. If there is data in the CRM, probably a customer's phone number is not right, an email address is not right. And just imagine the impact when a marketing manager wants to send out a campaign to all the customers. If the emails are not valid, then how good is the campaign? Next, please. So typical examples of in the source systems that we see are data problems are one, orphan data, right? Let's say that there is an order header and it has all its child objects like order line items. And then it's possible that the order header is missing or a wholesaler identifier is missing. And it is extremely critical for us to be confident that the referential integrity is maintained. There is no bad data in terms of every child record has a proper parent. So missing data can be one major issue. Next, please. Another record. Often, let's say that an acceptable list is USA, India, China in your tuple, but then it is possible for, again, for various reasons that the contact ID could be missing, or there could be a country which is not in the acceptable list of the tuple, like there is an accidental A, an additional A in China, so which could again result in analytics issues and downstream processes. Next, please. The other thing is inaccurate data. Like I said before, email is expected to be of a certain format. So how can we be confident that all the data in this particular source system is as expected? Next, please. So this is all in the source systems, right? Where it could be a database, it could be XML, it could be a flat file, whatever it is. First, we need to be confident that the data in this phase 1, which is the source system, is as expected. And the next level is phase 2, where we are moving the data from these source systems into your stage, into your warehouse, into your march, etc. So as we move this data, how confident are we that the data actually moved as expected? Because ETL or any similar process is typically has systemic risk in it. So how can we mitigate that risk? How can we minimize, identify the issues with them and address them early on? And one of the problems that we see, especially when we talk about ETL or moving data from one system to another, it doesn't matter when we are talking about PL SQL, or it doesn't matter if we are using Informatica or other ETL tools. Whatever the process or technology we use to move data from A to B, it is possible that the data may not have moved as expected. Let's say that in this example, incomplete transfers is one issue that we normally see. So if you have 1 million records and you expect to move that data into this warehouse, only 900,000 have moved. Why? There could be so many reasons. Maybe it's some filter conditions. Maybe it's some error in the ETL process. So it's important for the testing teams, for the engineering, product manager, all the stakeholders to really identify these issues early on and address them. So the next issue is like a transformation error. As most of us know, transformations, let's say if we have 100% of the ETL jobs, at least about 30% are lookup transformations typically, and then there are other simple transformations, rule-driven transformations. Well, if at all we have this kind of a rule where if the donation end date is null, the donor should be considered as active. But it is possible that for whatever reason, an expected record is not as expected. Like 101, we expect it to be in active, but then in the warehouse it shows up it is inactive. It could be again an expression issue. It could be some problem. But the important thing is identifying it early on. Very similarly, in the unexpected target records, right? Let's say we move data from A to B again, then we move 2 records. You expect that you should not see few records in the target, but then typically we end up seeing some additional records which should not have been purged, etc. So how can we identify them? This is a very common pattern or a problem in the ETL scenarios. So finally, we covered sources, we talked about ETL, and finally when the data gets into the reporting system, when the reports are built on top of the warehouse, how confident are we that the data that is being reflected in the report is trustworthy? Because that's a typical problem that we encounter across the board, that the reports may look great, but can I actually take a decision based upon this data set is a major question. So, and the issues that we see in the reporting system are, let's say, regression issues, right? So a customer could be on a version 10 or version 11, whatever the reporting platform is. It could be Oracle, it could be Cognos, it could be anything. So if I upgrade from one version to a higher version, or a change can be made to a CR, how can I be confident that the report actually renders in the UI, right? I may not have the bandwidth to test everything. All I did was just a simple CR or a minor upgrade. So how can I be confident that none of my reports have broken? I need to be able to very quickly go through the entire reporting system and ensure that none of the reports actually broke because of this minor change. Next slide, please. Performance. So not necessarily the report is broken, but prior to an upgrade, let's say that a report or a dashboard was taking 2 seconds. if you're lucky. And after the upgrade, you never know. The report could be working fine, but then after the upgrade, there could be some issue, some performance level issue, a logical query change or a physical query change, whatever must have happened. And then it's important to really understand that, hey, this particular performance for this particular report has degraded after the upgrade. Let me try to figure out why and take action on top of that. Next slide, please. Another major factor when we talk about reporting systems is stress testing, right? Again, it could be a pre-upgrade or a post-upgrade scenario, or it could be adding additional enhancements. Pre-upgrade, when we say that, okay, if 100 users are accessing the system concurrently, the system is performing great. 500 users, no problem. 1,000 users, no problem. 10,000, yes, it's choking. It's very important to understand the system as concurrent users access it. And then, let's say after an upgrade, it is possible that for 1,000 users, it's actually squeaking, it's complaining, and it's not able to perform. No other changes have been made. It's just that the reporting system, has been upgraded from version 1 to version 2, and due to which there's a lot of concurrency issues, load issues. So one of the major issues that we've identified, we've been doing tremendous amount of research, talking to a lot of clients across the board, and what we figured was that the current testing patterns are ineffective, inefficient, very tedious, and of course expensive. And the problems emanate for multiple reasons. One, while the population in a typical data project, whether it is a warehouse, a data migration, or an upgrade, the population is at least in millions of records. However, that when we do the testing aspect, what is normally done is the testing person will get a couple of records from the source, a couple of records from the target, and then manually compare them. Well, if the population is small, that's great, but here the population is very, very high, and the small data set that we're actually doing in Excel is completely insufficient. It is not statistically significant, and we cannot take any decision based upon the small data set used in the testing aspect. The next element is manual eyeballing. Often, almost 60 to 70% of the customers have manual eyeballing. Like I said before, the testing happens by a QA person or testing person copies a bunch of records from the source, from the target, and then manually compares each of these numbers or the text. Again, if it's a handful of records, fine. Let's imagine that there are 100 columns in a table. It becomes tedious for the testing person to be effective about this process. And finally, custom programming. One of the common patterns that we're also seeing in the field is that there is a lot of custom programming, either for load testing, people use like a load runner or complex tools. There are also a few open source tools, but then what happens is the cost of maintaining these tools over a period of time is pretty expensive. You need somebody who knows Java. You need somebody who knows complex technologies or custom technologies or scripting to actually maintain these tools. And our mission is primarily to get into a solution and provide solution and services collectively, Idexcel and Datawarehouse, to actually address the above problems. So what we did was we came up with a best practices white paper. I'm not sharing all the details here because it's very, very detailed and runs into multiple pages. But just to give you a flavor, what Datawarehouse did was we put together this paper which identifies, okay, what are the popular issues that we see in data entity testing. When I say data entity, I'm talking about all the source systems, flat files, XML, so databases, etc. What are the things that need to be done as best practices for data entity testing? So on the left side, we need to check data validity. We need to check data consistency. We need to check and ensure that the referential integrity is maintained. And then we also highlighted in the white paper on what the test strategy should be, right? How should the plan be? What should you test? How should you test? So we have a detailed description for data entity. So in this case, you see that for data validity, you can ensure that the list contains an acceptable list of values. So we need to basically create a lookup and ensure that all the values in the database or the flat file are as per the spec. Next slide, please. So after phase one, which is the data entity testing, Now next is the ETL testing. What are the important aspects of testing an ETL process? First is data completeness. Then it's data integrity. How do we ensure that the integrity is maintained? And then in the white paper, we've highlighted many rules or many types of tests which need to be carried on, again, to ensure that the transformations have happened correctly, to ensure that the data moved as expected. And when it comes to transformations, just to give you an example, if there are 1 or 2 transformations, let's say that the x is equal to f of y, and then we apply x prime, x2 prime, 3 prime, it's okay to test by actually replicating what the development team did. But if there are, let's say, 20 or 15 transformations, which are not that common, but we have seen examples like that. If there are 15 transformations or 10 transformations applied on a single record, then is it worthwhile to really simulate that in testing? Absolutely not. And our recommendation for data transformations is, depending upon the amount of transformation that has been applied, we need to figure out if we want to replicate it in the QA cycles, or if we just want to take sample data and then look at the end data set and make sure that the data matches and be confident that the transformation is happening as expected. Right? Next slide, please. Similar to ETL testing, again going back to the third tier, the BI testing. So what are the various aspects which need to be vetted out in a BI project? We need to be able to do regression testing to ensure that none of the new reports or the dashboards which have been developed have any negative impact. We need to do various things like stress testing. We need to do performance testing. There are so many aspects of BI as well, which are again laid out in the white paper. We've received tremendous feedback on the white paper. It has been presented at Collaborate 2013. And if you are interested, please email and we'll be happy to forward it to you. Okay. Next, so our value proposition fundamentally is with the solution and the services is that we want to first improve the data and BI quality, right? Second, we want to expedite time to market. Gone are the days when we have 6-month projects. Now everything business is at a lightning speed, and we have to deliver reports and dashboards to business at a much faster pace. And how can we be confident about our delivery, right? Third thing is minimizing the testing costs. How can we, these are not just the costs associated with manual testing, but the cost associated with testing over a period of time, identifying the latent defects in the system and proactively addressing them during the system integration testing, UAT, etc., as opposed to waiting for post-production. And our objective is to say we want to help customers achieve 100% test coverage. Well, is this mandatory? May not be. It depends on the situation, but at least you should have the capability to achieve that. Second, how can we achieve 100% data validation? How can we minimize the need for any custom code? So there should be zero programming is our objective. And repeatability is a major thing. Of course, cost saving, and fundamentally, how can the IT teams build trust in business? How can they trust the reports that we deliver? So as part of our solutions, I don't want to get into the details, but just to give you a flavor for how these solutions look. We have 2 products. One, we call it as the ETL Validator, and as you see on the bottom, it is used primarily for flat file testing, for source system testing. XML is something that we are adding right now. ETL testing, fundamentally collaboration. How can we facilitate a platform whereby all the stakeholders, engineering, business analysts, QA, project management, everybody is aligned with the quality of a data warehousing project. So we believe in collaboration, so that collaboration aspect is built into the platform as well. So this is all for ETL and complete data testing. And on the reporting side, currently we support Oracle Business Intelligence, but we do have a product called BI Validator that is primarily used for stress testing, dashboards, reports, upgrade, etc. And today, I'll take a few minutes. I don't want to spend too much of time, but after this slide, I'll walk you through the product and how it looks like. And ETL Validator, we did a lot of ROI analysis as well in the field based upon customer feedback and what we are noticing. Obviously, as the number of runs increase, the savings are more, right? So as the number of runs, 5, 10, 15, 20, because ETL happens normally on a consistent basis, either incremental ETLs or full loads. So we need to ensure that the price of the tool sort of makes up for the automation and is helpful. So we noticed that as the number of runs increase, the cost savings go up. And then finally, the time efficiencies. With the tool, we are able to really skim down, but save timing up to 60–70%. We are able to increase the productivity of the automation process. In a manual testing process, the time is kind of linear. It goes up as per the number of runs increase. But with the automation, we are able to keep the time very low because most of the tests can be scheduled once, and then they keep running over a period of the agile process or depending on the time frame. Okay.
Now I'll hand over the control to Adi so he can show his screen.
All right, so here is the tool, which we call it as the ETL Validator. I do have control, Venkat. You see that?
Yes. Cool.
Okay. So here is the tool that we've been talking about, the ETL Validator. Fundamentally, I'll just give you a high-level overview. On the left side, this is a list of all your test cases, your automation test cases in your system, and then test plans are a way of packaging these test cases and then scheduling them over time, depending upon your agile cycles, depending upon your sprints, whatever they are. And then DB Explorer is where you actually define your database connections. Whether it is source systems or others, you can actually define them here so that you can leverage them across the board. And then on the last thing is the BI Explorer, because one of the fundamental things is the final test for any warehouse project is I'm looking at a report. Is the data that I'm looking at in the report consistent with my source system? So I can build a test case to ensure that. I'm not getting into the details, but just to give you a flavor. And also the various types of test cases that you can actually build using this tool are here. Let's say that the simplest of the cases is I want to write my source query, I want to get my target query and compare the records. So using this tool, I don't have to manually write the queries, I don't have to copy the records into an Excel platform, but I can just define my test case here, use a visual query builder to actually build my query just by very simple methods, and then build my test case and automate over time. Data rule test plan is the objective here is if you want to pick up a table in one of your schemas and hey, I expect the format of these tables to be of like this. So you can define a set of rules saying that I expect this column to be of an email format, I expect this to be a date of birth, a particular date, etc. And what the tool does is it ensures that the test plan gets executed, and if at all the data doesn't adhere to the rules, then it will let you know. Similarly, you can check foreign keys because referential integrity is one major thing. So how confident are you that there is no noise in the warehouse and all the referential integrity is maintained when we bring in data from so many sources? So there are other kinds of test plans that we keep adding in based on what we see in the field, which are commonly used. And our objective is to provide a simple UI where testing teams, business analysts, engineering teams can actually define the test cases for unit testing, system testing, or throughout their development process. And then I'll walk you through one simple use case. So here the objective is I just completed the ETL flow and I want to ensure that the ETL actually did its job as expected. Right? So I define, let's say I define this December 3, whatever, I give it a name, and then in the next I select what my source is. So obviously this could be multiple sources, they need not be the same database. So here I can say, hey, TGT_customers is my table. I can optionally specify a stage, but here I'll just skip that. I can select a different database here, different schema. It could be any database, NetEase, whatever. So I select the SRC customers, and then in the next screen, I can either choose to enter the queries manually or use Informatica. We have some predetermined integration with Informatica. I'll just skip that. So here's my source query. I can make edits to it as needed, no problem. And once I'm happy with that, I go into my target. And finally, I can also specify if I have a mapping file, which is a very common practice in the industry, to say, hey, these are the columns in the source, map to these columns in the stage or target, I can specify them there. For now, I'll just skip that. I'll use this as a join condition, customer ID. So the mapping is already automatically done based upon the column names by the tool. And here it's creating a test case. So the test case has a bunch of components like source, stage, and target. I can view that automation test case. This is how a test case looks like in the tool. So there is a visual palette, and I have my source, I have my stage, the mapping. The rule is defined in the mapping to compare the data, and when I run it, what it does at this point of time is it's actually extracting the data using our patented technology from the source, getting the data from the target, using the rules defined in the mapping component to compare the data and then spit out the results. If the data exactly matches, no problem, but if it doesn't match, it'll let the user know here. So in this case, I have a mapping. I click on failure because I want to know why. So there are 3 tabs here. The first tab shows what is the data set which is there in the source but not in the target, right? So all these records, for whatever reason, did not move into the target as expected. Here it shows only the data which is in the target. There isn't anything, which is a good sign. We've got to be happy about that. And then the differences, if at all there's any data differences, then it will highlight it in a visually easy way so that as I skim through, notice that the records are different. The avenue got truncated, so immediately the testing person would know that, aha, this is because either of a schema change. He can work with engineering to understand, identify the issue, and fix it. So that's what the product looks like. It is very robust. A lot of things can be done, but I don't want to get into the details in this particular presentation because we want to keep it at a high level about the industry, about the practices more than the tool. Venkat, you want to take control?
Let me get it back. Thanks a lot, Adi, for the demo. So just to recap and conclude, what we've seen is data is very important, and a lot of testing has to be done on the data alongside the application functionality and UI testing. So a lot of times this is what is a gap in the QA area, what I've seen in my experience. We focus a lot on the application functionality and the UI and don't really care about the data that's behind the application, which is an important aspect of element of a total business process. So the third thing that we have seen is sampling of data is not sufficient. Millions of records and a lot of data volumes, but if you take a small subset of that, you might not be really hitting on all the conditions that you want to test. So that's why sampling of data is not sufficient. So how do we achieve optimization in terms of testing? So the only way is to use a lot of automation and tools that can bring in this efficiency into the testing process. And also alongside, like to think about a lot of best practices, doing things in a certain way so that you are for sure guaranteeing the quality of the data that you're having in your system. So that's the crux of this presentation, and I think we've communicated a lot of information. And now I think now we'll open up the floor for questions. If you already typed in some questions, and I will be able to ask the questions. And if you have any questions that you want to ask offline, you can either email me or Adi, and we'll be more than happy to get back to you with our answers. Anna, so far, did you receive any questions?
Yeah, I have a few questions coming in, Venkat. I'll start with who are the typical users of ETL Validator?
Sure, Anna. So typically what happens is this can be leveraged by engineering, business analysts, and of course the testing team. These are the primary roles which we've defined this tool for. So to keep it simple, so that even business analysts can actually leverage some visual tools to build the queries. So yeah, these are the 3 roles I would say: engineering, testing, business analysts.
Yeah, the primary thing is there's not too much of coding involved in this. It's more building the queries, and the tool has the ability to drag and drop kind of options for easier query building, right, Adi?
That's correct. Yeah.
So that makes it easy for a lot of population from the development side, business analysts and QA equally. to be able to leverage this tool.
Right. We really want to embrace the concept of data testing, make it easy. It's like application testing is something visual, people can click through screens, at least it's intuitive. But data testing has not gotten the attention that it deserves because there was no proper technology to make it look better, to make it simple. So that is the vision.
Okay. Here's another one. I deal with flat files. Can ETL Validator help me?
Absolutely. So flat files are a very common pattern in data integration, whether it is a warehouse or even in a regular process. So using the tool, yes, flat files can be automated. So data can be compared between flat files, flat file and tables, any combination really.
Okay, and how is ETL Validator different from other test tools like QTP?
Right. QTP and other tools in the market have a different function. They are geared more towards application testing, but this one, ETL Validator, is primarily geared towards data-driven testing. And also there is no custom, unlike other tools, ETL Validator does not have any custom programming or custom scripting. It's all very simple, UI-driven, and just the queries, that's about it, nothing else.
Yeah, so they can be put into two different buckets if I answer this question properly. So the UI testing is primarily done using the tools like QTP, and backend testing it's more on the data elements. That's that's the area where ETL Validator really helps. So there are some ways of doing a little bit of database testing using QTP, but not as intuitive and as exhaustive as ETL Validator.
That's correct, Venkat. Yeah.
Okay, and how does ETL Validator fit into an agile environment?
Sure. So it's been designed with an agile environment in mind. So there is a concept called scheduling, and typically in an agile world we have sprints every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, depending upon each company's process. And what can be done using ETL Validator is the testing teams can actually define test cases, they can package them into test plans, and then schedule them over time so that at the end of every sprint, these test plans can be run automatically without any human intervention. Because testing folks cannot, they can do only so much of testing in a given 2-week period. They cannot take care and ensure that the prior sprint has no regression, right? So all the test plans can be scheduled so that they'll be run automatically and the results shared with all the stakeholders so that they can be confident that there is no regression with each sprint.
Any other questions, Anna?
Okay, yeah, a few more. Can the product help with testing data migration as well?
Yes. So the patterns are very similar because whatever data patterns we consider, whether it is a data migration or a data warehouse, there are differences, but majority of the test cases can be leveraged across. Yes, the answer is yes. And we do have some case studies on that as well.
Okay. And what are the differences between database and ETL testing?
Database testing primarily is geared more towards referential integrity, ensuring it's a subset. ETL can be a lot more complex because we have data moving across systems, and also the nature of the data sources is very different. So database is standalone, it's relatively simpler, whereas if you want to test ETL, we need to be testing flat files, XMLs, data coming in from various sources and moving into the enterprise through Informatica or through other ETL technologies or even through PL SQL. So ETL is a lot more complicated just because of the nature of the data sources and the volume of data that's moving and how it is being transformed along the way before it reaches its destination.
And is 100% validation a must?
It is not a must, but in many industries what happens is, especially I come from a life sciences background, and there are regulations like laid out by FDA. So in that case, 100% is mandatory, but at least having the ability to do that is a mandate. So life sciences industries like life sciences, healthcare, financial do have some capability by leveraging this tool to achieve 100% validation. And where we are going at is also to support significant sample size. So in some occasions, it may not necessitate or it may not mandate 100% validation, but at least the statistically significant sample size should be adopted for testing. So that is what we're getting towards. So we support both models.
Okay. And there are a couple more questions if we have time, Venkat.
Yeah, we have a few more minutes, 3 more minutes. We scheduled for 45 minutes, so we are good. Good with the questions.
Okay. What are the typical challenges for testing teams?
Especially when, Venkat, you can chime in as well, but especially from our exposure, what we notice is that first, the documentation is not very well laid out. Typically, the testing team comes in a little bit late into the game, so the documentation of whether it is a mapping or what kind of transformation is applied to each table or as the data moves, it's not clearly laid out, and collaboration is another major challenge. And the third thing is the source system, technically speaking, it should align to a data format or a data profile, but often that is not the case. There is always some rogue data sitting in the databases, which makes testing a lot more challenging.
Okay, and the last one, what are the goals of testing automation?
Definitely we want to improve the productivity. I think, whatever tools customers choose, improving the productivity is a major thing so that the testing teams focus on the right problems and then achieving repeatability, right? So every time we don't want to go through the same process again and again, so we want to ensure that we can achieve repeatability through this automation. These are the primary things I think come to my mind.
Yeah, and time to market, and also something else like, if they're doing incremental building, incremental build for the product. So, as you go through the increments, you'll have more and more functionality to test, and at the same time, you have more and more regression to do. So, especially that's a situation where automation can be very handy, ensuring that your system is all regression tested while you manually do the progression testing. And it's kind of a very nifty option or a handy option for coverage, good coverage for your application, both from regression as well as progression testing.
Yeah, great point, Venkat.
Yeah. And I think we are almost at the end of our scheduled time. If you have any other questions, we'll respond back in the email. Okay, and please collate all the rest of the questions as well. And to the audience, if you have any other questions, please do send an email to me or Adi, and we'll be more than happy to respond back and clarify any other questions. Or if you have any questions on any of the material that we presented, feel free to ask us. Also, we're going to host this on our website. Post this session so that if people who want to relook at this at a later point in time can always do that, or people who have missed it halfway, probably they would have joined halfway through the presentation, so they can also have the opportunity to go through that session and the webinar completely. With that, I would like to thank you all for joining us today. I know you must be having pretty busy schedules, and thanks for giving us the 45 minutes of your busy schedule. And we appreciate your time, and hope that we were able to convey a lot of information that was useful for you. And if you have any questions, as I said earlier, please do reach out back to us. Thank you all for joining us. Anything else, Adi?
That's about it. Thank you so much for your time.